Sean, and welcome to Sean and Dave Make Music. This month we bring you the third and final installment of our adventures in New York City. Our guest this episode is the brilliant music director, pianist, arranger, and educator Dan Pardo. Dan made his Broadway debut as assistant conductor and keyboardist for the show Amazing Grace, and has a huge list of off-Broadway and regional credits, including The Office, a musical parody, Found, Rothschild and Sons, Company, Soot and Spit, Skippy John Jones, Snow What? That last one sounds particularly fun. And another long list. I'll post all of Dan's links so you can check out his website and all of his various projects on the show notes. But Dan is also a very dear friend of both Dave and I, going back over a decade to our time together at Westchester University. It was a wonderful treat to sit down with him and catch up and create some really fun new music.
Hey guys. So sorry, you can start it.
All right, I think that's the best intro we're going to get. So
Yes.
Hello and welcome to Sean and Dave Make Music. We're here with Dan Pardo, the guest who feels most comfortable to start the show. Thank you. I don't have to do it.
Sure. It makes it easier when we've been jamming for the past 2 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree. Yeah, we always say, we said it like every episode, but we do this in the right order. Like,
Yeah.
So Dan is a longtime friend of ours, a classmate. We were just talking about our origin story and not being able to figure it out. There were red pants involved. There may have been a flute solo in a chorus piece. We're not really sure.
Possibly in Arl's 2 class.
Possibly, yeah. We'll give the shout out to Adam Silverman that we may or may not have been in his first class.
But
I know I definitely was.
I think I was too, but I think I might have misimagined.
Well, because
you.
I'm picturing the class. I remember him distinctly talking about how a lot of his. This is so tangential.
It's a podcast. We're going to start with the tangent.
A lot of his reference points in terms of oral association comes down to his beginnings as a Reformed Jew and that liturgical music. And I had a strong connection to that as another Reformed Jew who played a lot of liturgical music. And I remember that was in Old Swope. So that must have been first semester
Yeah, that's
freshman year.
thing. Yep. I think for whether you were in there or not, maybe it's a Berenstein Bears situation where I just imagine you being there.
That might be it.
Yeah.
But for the life of me, I can't remember who I had for Arles too.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure Adam Silverman was the first class I had with him. I think was Theory 4.
Oh, okay.
I think the first and only.
Well, actually, and one other tip of the hat to him, in today's theme song, you'll hear we feature the Broadway classic Super Sus Chord.
There you go.
Which we learned that title for it from.
The 4/5.
Yeah.
For those keeping track.
So we just did a whole bunch of stuff. You do so much. How do you keep going? And
why don't you give a quick bullet point list for the listeners at home, just a spark notes of the 8 things that you do?
Well, I mean, I'm always hustling. As a New York-based musician, unless you have a chair at a long-running show or a symphony gig, you kind of have to be doing the juggle. So I'm not a composer. I work with a lot of them, but I do. I'm a theatrical music director primarily, which means I get kind of thrown into these productions, and I run the rehearsals, and then play either a short run, or if it's just a workshop scenario, it would be 2 or 3 performances that for the purpose of moving a show forward. In the city, I also play for a couple different studios and some educational things. I play, I think it's called Malloy College, formerly Cap 21, and for a private kind of theatrical studio called The Growing Studio, and also through a studio run by the amazing Jen Waldman. I play for some tap classes at a place called Shuffles on West 68th Street. I play for some kind of little baby music type things at a company called Little Maestros. So there's always many things that are up in the air, plus a lot of freelance work as a copyist and transcriptionist. I'm throwing down some tunes for some writers in the Midwest right now, and we actually opened, this is Sunday we're filming, so on Friday night a show in Ottawa opened called The Hockey Sweater that I did the copyist work for. Plus, I'm currently music directing and conducting a run of A Connecticut Christmas Carol up at Goodspeed, where I was on staff for 3 years. So, You just kind of have
You do
to
about everything. It's pretty awesome.
And if 3/4 of them pay, that's it's a good.
You said Ottawa, right? Was that Eli's?
No, that
Or
was
was
that.
it-
That was a different thing that I did in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this has been like the year of Canadian musicals, which is good because everyone's very friendly and they pay well. So-
Awesome.
Is the long-term goal to sort of pare that down and get a longer run of something, or do you love just doing everything and like the variety?
I think ideally the people who do have long-running shows, because they have that security, it gives them then the freedom to do some things on the side
And be more selective with the things that they
exactly
do on the side.
as opposed to trying to grab onto everything just because you need to cobble together a career. I was talking to my friend DC Anderson, who was in the Broadway company of Phantom of the Opera for 12 years. And, everyone, when they see that kind of a resume item, that's like, oh my God, what do you do for 12 years? His answer was a lot, because, that was kind of his night gig. And he's a singer-songwriter, so he would have the opportunity to write some songs during his days off and put together a lot of benefit cabarets for causes that were dear to him, and collaborate with people in his cast who weren't there for such a long stint of time. And ideally, I would kind of use that as a model to, have a show that I really love, that hopefully I had a role in, either as an arranger or, writing some incidental music or facilitating in some way, because so much of what I love to do is get in with the show on the ground floor and contribute to its process.
Development.
Yeah. And so to have that type of a show that feels mine, in the sense that gives me the time and the financial security to do things like my web series, or do things like a 29-hour reading that rehearses during the day and then has a presentation on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good goal to have. You're sort of waiting for the right thing.
Hey, I mean, right now I'm just waiting for anything. I'll take whatever comes my way. But for people who are really in demand, they have that freedom to be selective.
Mm. Yeah, that would be nice.
Oh yeah.
I'm almost getting to that point with like students. I'm at almost my max capacity of private students right now. I have 45.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm.
Do they all meet weekly with you, or
almost all of them? I have, I think, two or three that are every other week.
So half-hour lessons, 45 minutes? Or?
Most are half an hour, a couple are an hour, and a couple are 45. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it keeps me busy. Yeah. And so now I'm at the point where I'm like, I have a few people on my wait list, a few people I've like turned away because like we can't find a time that works, and I'm like wondering if I can like start swapping people out, not like pass off the instruments that I don't want to teach as much as I want to teach the flute to somebody else. And
I forget, don't you work through a parent company of some sort?
I work for 3 different places. I teach through 2 music stores and 1 music school.
Okay.
So like there at the music school, it's certainly not going to be possible to do that. They sign up per semester.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking like, I mean, now that you've reached your peak, like it might be, next step might be to start just building up privately where you can make double the money and just slowly let that overtake the others.
See, I live in a really poor area and I teach in a really rich area.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
So
it would be driving like
I would have
do.
to. Yeah. I totally don't want to drive to any of these houses. I don't want to drive any more than I already do.
Gotcha.
So that's I really like I added one more in-home lesson recently, and that's worked out fine. But yeah, no, I don't want to do more driving than I already do. My wrists hurt. All right, for our first track of the episode, we have a short bluesy improvisation with myself on flute, Dan on piano, and Dave on bass guitar. This was actually the 5th and final improvisation we did that day, and at the end of this one, you can kind of hear it. I think you can tell. We sort of run out of steam. And I considered cutting it a little bit early, but I think we ran out of steam in an interesting enough way to present, so here it is. I dusted off my beatbox flute skills for this one a little bit, but now listening back, I wish I would have committed more. I think I'll have to redeem myself in an upcoming episode with some more beatbox flute. And let's call this one, I don't want to do any more driving than I already do. My wrists hurt. Something I was gonna bring up was sort of balancing like a career and a home life. Mm-hmm. You know, how has that worked? Your wife is also a musician who we all know very well.
And
yeah,
I mean, it's been hard. We've been doing a lot of, distance relationship, and our relationship is kind of built on distance. I was on staff at the Regional Theater in Connecticut for 3 years, and 2 of the 3 years she was in Vegas doing her master's degree. And my hope was that I kind of build these contacts up and then kind of stay in the city. And for the first year, that kind of worked pretty well. But then I kind of developed some relationships with people out in Seattle, so I went and did 2 shows there for kind of 2 winters in a row. And this past summer, I was in Vermont, which was a schlep, but I had a really great time music directing Fun Home. And the summer before that, I had done this really beautiful production of Company at Barrington Stage, which Dave came up and saw it.
I did. It was wonderful.
And that's one of Christy's favorite shows, so she didn't mind me doing that one. But the goal is to do less work out of town. And actually, I don't know if I can make some news here on Sean and Dave Make Music, but
we don't know when this is going to be out, so it might,
that's okay.
It might not be new news.
Well, that's okay. Anyway, my next project after this Christmas Carol is a production of Working. It's a show from the early 80s that was kind of helmed by Stephen Schwartz, who did Godspell and Wicked and Pippin and a whole bunch of other stuff. But there's some other contributing songwriters to it. Craig Carnelia and James Taylor wrote a song, and it was all based on these interviews of people about their jobs, and they wrote songs about it. And a couple of years ago, Lin-Manuel Miranda from Hamilton and the Heights, Moana, wrote a couple songs for a production out in London, I think it was. And there's a theater in Connecticut called ACT, a contemporary theater, that was started by this man Dan Levine and his husband Brian Perry, who's been the resident music director over at Wicked for the past 5 years. So obviously they have a strong connection to Stephen Schwartz. So they're kind of reimagining it again with some new video interviews and footage. So I'm going to be music directing and conducting this production, and Chrissy was just cast as our swing.
Awesome. Oh, that's
so,
awesome. Congratulations to both of you.
Thanks.
That's so
We
cool.
get to work together on a production.
Yeah. So that's so in terms of balancing home life and work life, well, maybe this will be too much, but we'll.
You'll have to find a different balance.
Yeah, but it'll be a fun experiment because we've done some cabarets before together. Actually, I think I sent you a couple.
Yep. The Maybe Cellophane.
Yeah.
She was also singing on the vocal, the Into the Woods.
Yeah. So that was, the cabaret that we've done kind of twice, once at the Duplex and once at a place called Green Room 42, both venues in the city. It was a group called Ethnic Chameleons that we kind of put together, which was 4 mixed race performers kind of trying to find their place in this cosmetic business that kind of tries to put you in boxes. And so I did all our arrangements and music direction for that concert, and then we kind of replayed it a couple months later, and so that was fun. We just kind of self-produced, but otherwise, we're both involved with the National Asian Artist Project. Chrissy obviously as a singer, and me as a ringer, music director, pianist, since I am not of Asian descent. But we have a monthly cabaret up at Bartalia on 95th and Broadway that Chris usually sings for. And there was a choir that's also affiliated that I ran last term that Chrissy sang in. So
Sweet.
We try and work together when we can.
Yeah, that's great. And hopefully, it'll happen more often.
Yeah.
As you get more things local. And it's great.
Just because this is a nice little segue here, you mentioned the Chameleon concert and those pieces. Definitely for something that we're going to play for people to hear. I'll just cue it up now. I would love for them to hear the vocal arrangement that you did of. The name is slipping my mind, but the piece
No
from
One Is
Into the
Alone?
Woods. Yeah, No One Is Alone. The harmonies were gorgeous on
Thank
that.
you.
That was.
Yeah.
I would like you to please send me the PDF so I could learn how to do things
okay.
approaching that. I'm a Sondheim sucker, and but like the way you set that was so lovely.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how that arrangement kind of kept evolving. It started actually as almost an etude. I was up at my theater in Connecticut, Goodspeed Opera House, and for their off season, they have a couple education initiatives, and one is called the MDI, the Music Direction Intensive, and the goal is to get probably about 12 to 18 aspiring music directors in a room, and learn what it's like to become one. Because with very few exceptions, and all of those are relatively new, there is no training ground for this. It's kind of a hands-on. You can't major in theatrical music direction. Right now, I think you can get a master's from Penn State. Within the last 5 years, they started a program.
Okay.
And, sometimes they have, you can get a conducting master's that has like a musical theater focus. CCM has a pretty decent program, and I have a couple friends who have gone through it. But in terms of vocal arranging, running a rehearsal, kind of orchestration and keyboard reduction, what other things that we do? Working with the director, dance arranging and working with the choreographer, kind of incidental composition as it pertains to transitions and underscores. We have, it's an entire week, and we do like these little mini projects to kind of give people a taste of what it's like to become a music director. And so this No One Is Alone started out as an exercise, actually. Cool. And I envisioned it as kind of like a gay man's chorus version of this, using the text as a solidarity piece. And then I actually adapted it, expanded it a little bit, and pitched it to Westchester Vocal Jazz to try. And
okay.
I think I didn't realize they actually performed it until like 2 years later. This was back in like 2013 where I did the first draft of it, and I got a message out of the blue on like Facebook Messenger from someone who had sung it, and apparently it resonated with them. And he sent me a message. I'm like, that's awesome. I didn't even know they programmed it. Glad they let me know. But so it kind of stuck with me. And then obviously in the context of this Ethnic Chameleons, there's a lot of fear of, being the other. So I thought that the song and the text and my treatment of the text kind of spoke to that. And so I added a sparse piano part and obviously changed the key since I rearranged it for SATB. Actually, no, it was 3 guys and 1 girl. So it was a, SAAB-ish, there's a bunch of crossing voices because I composed it, kind of finding voicings that I liked on the piano and then trying to work backwards to find things that where the voice leading wasn't too bad.
Cool.
And here it is.
Mother isn't here now. Who knows what she's saying? Nothing's quite so clear now. Feel you lost your way. You are not alone. No one is alone. Just a finger, say the slightest word, something's bound to linger behind her. No one is alone. People make mistakes. People make mistakes, holding to their own, thinking they're alone. Hard to see the light now. Just don't let it go. Things will come out right now. We can make it so. Someone is on your side. No one is
Woo! Yeah, those harmonies get me every time. Next up, we've got another of Dan's arrangements. This is Coffee Break from Fifth Avenue Theater's production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying.
There's no coffee!
No coffee! No coffee! No coffee! No coffee!
No coffee! No coffee! If I can't take my coffee break, my coffee break, my coffee break! If I can't take my coffee break, something within me dies.
lies down and something within me dies.
No coffee! No coffee!
No coffee, 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 no coffee.
don't metabolize.
Something within me. Call me or otherwise. Call me or otherwise. Call me or otherwise. Something inside of me.
Now, going back to the fact that there's no program to teach music directing, that blows my mind with such a thriving art form right now. Like, classical music is dying everywhere, it seems like, a little bit at least, or at least losing its prominence, to my
Can I put forward a
understanding, at least.
controversial idea?
Yeah.
Does there really need to be a music directing production job, like the program? Only because, like, I feel like in order for somebody to do that job, just based on my own personal biases, I feel like you have to already be a beastly jack of all trades. Now, granted, people could learn that in a program.
I think it needs to be a master's level program.
That's what I mean. There's so much that you need to come to the table with already.
Yeah,
totally.
And then also it's something that I feel like it's probably you learn best by starting at the ground level and doing productions. And
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of how it started. My mentor...
I'm sorry, just to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You could say that
Point,
about
counterpoint.
any college,
Go ahead.
any college program, couldn't you? You probably
True.
learned better if you were just thrown into it and did the job and they taught you right away. Maybe not.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I mean, there definitely is an academic baseline that I think people, as a prerequisite, should have.
Sure. Certain tools already. Yeah.
But certainly for a master's level program, and I think this is why some of these programs are starting to pop up, and we'll see if we replay this episode in 3 years, if now there are a dozen. Because in terms of commercial music, theater is probably one of the more dependable jobs, or I mean, because even this MDI program that we did started attracting people who were orchestral or choral people, but now they need to run their musical, or now they also oversee the musicals at their college or university, and it really is a different or slightly off-center set of skills. They're usually you need to be a strong pianist or have a staff that has a strong rehearsal pianist available. There's a lot of demonstration as far as singing goes, because a lot of times, the actors are actors first, and they don't necessarily read music or read it well. So you have to be able to model effectively. A lot of times, you get a box from the licensing company, whether it's MTI or Tams Whitmark or whomever French, and it comes with 27 orchestra books, and you're told, okay, we have money for 7, or you're given 12, and it's like, okay, let's make this a tight 5-piece. So do you just eliminate books, or do you start to write a string reduction, or do you try and take 4 woodwind books and pare them down to 1 or 2? And so much of these types of things I've learned by first apprenticing and then kind of being an assistant, a departmental assistant, and assistant music director, and now that I'm kind of music directing at some regional spaces, I'm trying to pass off what I've learned along the way. But even just kind of formatting orchestra parts to see how orchestrators have done that work, it's really great to kind of witness that those choices in the room and behind the screen.
I'm sure it's probably the best way to learn the way you did it. But if there was a program and it could be really experienced teachers who have put in the years of time, and they could
it's amazing. Like
course of 4 semesters.
There's been some really great alumni just from this kind of 8-day program that we've done. And that's not to say that they wouldn't be where they were had it not been for this program. But Ian Weinberger, who's the associate conductor of Hamilton on Broadway, went through our MDI program, as did this guy Roberto Sinha, who is now on the road with Hamilton. He was the conductor for Kinky Boots on the road for a long time. And, just a laundry list of people who are doing great work, who kind of met and, collaborated for these brief moments you know, and they met because, as I said, you know, there's no real other place to get it.
Yeah. Well, at least there's that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like when I first got exposed to a lot of musicals, one of the things that came as a shock to me was that like I had learned like such and such composer wrote the music, and then I would listen to it over and over and be like, oh my God, how do they get all these elements? They're genius. And they are genius songwriters, the ones that I loved. But then like I learned like, oh, wait a second, if I see any other production of this same music, it's drastically different with like oftentimes the instrumentation, like the orchestrating, it's like a whole nother character, and it can be even more effective or less effective or just totally different tone for the show. And like I think that's so cool about that medium of theater, that like you guys really control so much of the tone and the direction, and for a listener like me, really like what I'm listening for in the first place is far more what the music director, arranger person is doing.
It's interesting because as an orchestrator, and I can't speak as an orchestrator firsthand, but I've worked with a lot of them. And when you get the licensing to do, let's say, I'm just looking at this quilt that has a whole bunch of, you know, so let's say you're doing, you know, Into the Woods. I think that was that tuning? I don't know who did the orchestrations offhand. But, you know, you have the default orchestrations that you have to buy as a part of the package, you know, for the licensing, but you're not contractually obligated to use them. You have to pay for them.
Yeah.
But you know, so if you have, for example, an on-staff orchestrator, you know, who does good work for and knows the musicians that you have, you know, on a regular basis, you can craft something that's a little bit more intimate or a little bit more, you know. I think I gave you a recording of How to Succeed of a little bit of coffee break from when I did it in Seattle, and when we had done it, the director Bill Berry said, you know, I want this sound to be a little less, you know, sappy and sentimental, really kind of dig into the big band element. So we didn't have any strings at all. And a Seattle-based composer and orchestrator named Bruce Monroe reorchestrated the entire score, you know, based on some of the original parts. And then because we were taking that step, it allowed us to let the rest of the score breathe a little bit. I wrote a couple transitions, and then I wrote a big dance break for Coffee Break, which ended up getting pared down in previews. And but you know, having that a score that isn't necessarily locked in gave us that ability. And, you know, not every theater can do that. The Fifth Avenue Theater has had, I don't know how many shows transfer to Broadway, including, you know, Shrek and Aladdin and Motown and, you know, a whole bunch of other stuff. So they have a rapport with these licensing companies and the composers and the estates to, you know, to give them some latitude. You know, not every high school can just, you know, change, you know, shows willy-nilly. But, you know, when you're in a place that has that rapport with the creators, they'll give you a chance, you know, especially if it's breathing some new life, whether it means the fiasco version of Into the Woods that did just the piano, or this recent revival in London with Company that had a female Bobby, or
I didn't even hear about that. That's
cool. With
you
know, Sondheim was resistant for a long time, and he finally said, "Let's do it," and apparently it got really great reviews. So.
awesome.
Next, we've got a somewhat longer improvisation to share with you. This one is expansive and lyrical and mostly consonant, and creates a really lovely atmosphere. It was really fun existing in and creating this space while we were playing, but I think this is a piece that's actually just as enjoyable to listen to as it was to create, which is certainly not always the case with free improvisation. I played flute on this one, Dan played piano, and Dave played djembe. Can you talk a little bit about two things, probably at the same time? How did you get your start? Where, I met you when you were already an impressively good musician, but I don't really know what happened and how you got to that point. Did you start with piano, and when did that happen? Or what?
Well, I have a sister who's just over 3 years older than I am, and when she was about 6, her best friend was this girl named Maxine Ginsberg, whose mother was a piano teacher. So she started taking piano lessons with Maxine's mom, and, being that I was 3, I would have to go along for the ride and, kind of sit next to the piano or on the couch or wherever while she was having her lessons. And I just soaked up everything. I just was obsessed with it. And I would go home and try and figure out the music that she was assigned for the week. And Sarah was like, "Mom, Dan's playing my music." So, my mom's like, "Oh, well, maybe we can get him lessons." And so, at the time, I'm not teaching a 3-year-old. This is stupid. And so I exactly. And, by the time I turned 4, we had pestered her enough. So I started with her, and then she actually moved away, and I was given.
Don't take offense to that.
No.
It probably wasn't because of you.
No. But then I started with another teacher who then kind of recommended me to a different person. So anyway, I started out as a pianist, and kind of as a combination of playing by ear and reading, and I got I think probably a standard classical training. But at this, what happened simultaneously was that when I was 6 years old, I did my first onstage role with my family in a JCC production of Fiddler on the Roof, and then
Awesome.
A couple years later, I did a production of Oliver, and then Children of Eden and Annie and a whole bunch of others. And by the time I had gotten through high school, I'd done a few dozen stage shows. And when I was 10 years old, those paths kind of intersected. And this is kind of a whole story unto itself. But long story short, I ended up being the unlikely accompanist of a children's production of Snow White when I was 10. And
Cool.
it went well. And I then started playing other, mostly children's theater shows, but then it turned into other community theater shows. I started playing in the pit of not my high school, but the neighboring Reading High, which was actually a lot bigger with a much bigger program. And I did 3 years Chicago Little Shop in the Wiz, as their rehearsal accompanist and key one player. And then, my last couple of years of high school, I started kind of music directing outright full musicals at local amateur groups. I did a production of Urinetown, Jesus Christ Superstar, The Who's Tommy. And at this theater where I was doing most of the work, we had put together a 35th anniversary concert because the theater was formed in 1971. And what I didn't know was that the person who founded the theater, this is called Genesius Theater in Reading, Pennsylvania, the co-founder of this theater is a man named Michael O'Flaherty, who since 1993, I think, has been the resident music director of this Goodspeed Opera House, where I have.
Yeah.
So that was the connection. I didn't know him growing up. I didn't realize that we were from the same hometown. He went to Wilson High School, if anyone is from Berks County. But he came back to do this concert and sing a song or two, but I had music directed the rest of the concert. And he's like, "Oh, who's this kid, who's kind of doing some good work with my theater? Why don't you come up for a summer?" So I was already at Westchester for a year, after which I went the summer after my freshman year to kind of intern with him. And so I did High Button Shoes at the main stage, and I did a lot of the kind of music department grunt work, a lot of the finale copyist work, and I was not good at finale then, but so I really kind of had a crash course because I had to input just the sheer volume of music in a theatrical context forces you to get really proficient at finale. And I say finale and not a music notation software because as far as musical theater goes, no one except the Brits use Sibelius, just because finale was first, and
Everyone learned it already?
Yeah, musical theater, kind of jumped on it really early. So I got really good at finale, and I played second keyboard for a couple of their shows at the main opera house, and then I was the assistant music director for they have a developmental space called the Norma Terrace Theater, and that's just, I think, the Terrace Theater, which is where I'm doing the Christmas Carol now. But we did a musical version of Happy Days with a score by Paul Williams, who wrote all the Carpenter songs and the Rainbow Connection and Evergreen. And so he was there the entire summer, which was awesome. And John McDaniel was the music director, or supervisor rather, who was the band leader on Rosie O'Donnell's show, who I watched every day after school with my sister. So that was a dream, but the thing was, I did all this not because I knew that's what I wanted to do. I kind of did it because I thought it'd be fun, and I didn't have any other summer plans. But then I'm like, all right, back to Westchester because I'm going to be a high school choir director. And, because that's, I always, that's just
because the path seems so narrow when you're in it, like in that training set, setting.
Yeah, and it's funny, like I did well in high school, and some people have asked, like what sold me on Westchester, and obviously it's a great music school, and but I wanted to be a choir director, and it had the music education program was so important to me, and I had my interview with Dr. Sprinkle. Anyway. And he really sold it for me. And a lot of the other kind of fancier schools didn't have education programs. And, my cousin Josh, who's also a musician, is kind of one of the role model mentors, in my life. And he went to Columbia for music. And, as he was finishing up, I was kind of starting up. And, I just, I don't know if it's, family pressure among, like, you need to have something that has more of a firm, job behind it. Yeah. So I'm like, that's why I didn't even bother auditioning. I had one reach school. It was Oberlin, because they had a really good music education program. And I think I got into the school, but not the conservatory or something, I didn't get exactly the program that I wanted to. So I ended up settling for Westchester, which was, a great decision for me. But
yeah, I think you get out as much as you want to from that school. If you put in actual work. And
the faculty, like we were just talking, Randy, one of our vocal professors, just got a nomination for a Grammy for best classical. Did he?
For him doing Winterreise.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, and all my professors, I feel like just were really fantastic. So, if you put in the work,
I agree. You can get a conservatory quality education there for sure. Did you stick that out and graduate with an education degree?
I did.
Wow.
I had
good on you.
I was so blunt. Like, even after I finished, it was like I think it was just because I was lazy that I didn't go and really pursue. I'm sure that's probably Chrissy calling me.
It wasn't. He didn't answer it. Also, this isn't actually Dan's ringtone. Back to the show.
So
we were talking about sticking it out, and like you made it through methods. I was an education major for 2.5 years.
Yeah. I had methods. I had a really great placement in both my education, or my elementary and secondary education student teaching settings. I still keep in touch with some of my old students and my kind of cooperating teachers. But it was just because I was too lazy to find an actual teaching job. And, the people at Goodspeed kind of floated this idea. It's like, if you want to come back. And I'm like, maybe. And it's like, maybe I'll push it off a year. And then maybe I'll push it off 2 years. And maybe now I can actually have a future in this and not have to worry about all the, the hoops to jump through and of academia. And, my sister's a teacher. My mom works in education. And, here they both like their jobs, but I hear a lot of things surrounding their jobs with it's like, I don't want to deal with that.
The politics of teaching.
Exactly. And now I still have the opportunity to do some, to work with students when I can, and run some workshops or master classes, or and then it's kind of,
it's easy to scratch.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't need to be every day.
Exactly.
Our next improv is very different from the last, both in terms of instrumentation and character. I stayed on flute for this one, but Dan switched over to slide whistle, and Dave played on a tin can, a washboard tie, flasks filled with water, and an emergency heat blanket. The result is wonderfully, ridiculously quirky, and I think you can tell that we had a lot of fun exploring the different textural possibilities and ways to complement one another's respective sounds in this one. I wanted to also talk a little bit specifically about the piano and get your thoughts on this because I brought this up to Robert Dick too, and I think some instruments are better than others, and I'll stand by that.
Like objectively better than others?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Like the flute, I sort of think is objectively better than a lot of other wind instruments, just because of the range of possibilities you can get on it. I'm obviously biased. I realize that, but
Yeah.
But I think piano is another one that it's got staying power for a reason, and it's so versatile, and you get such a complete picture of what's going on in basically whatever you're playing, that I really think it is one of the best instruments. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, because as someone who kind of learned to play by ear, there's anything that I hear, unless it's like some really strange modern soundscape type thing, you can create a facsimile on the piano. And, even in the context of musical theater, you'll have your, key one book to play, if it's scored for piano, but almost every score has a piano conductor version or for a rehearsal piano version, so they take all the information and kind of filter it down to a piano reduction, and that's kind of how I hear music. I'll be hearing something on the radio, and I'm picturing what my left hand would be doing, or it's almost like even a tactile impulse. I hear something and I feel what my right hand would be playing.
Yeah.
And if you were playing, a saxophone, you might be able to, hear what lick you would superimpose on top of it. But there is no macroscopic view.
Yeah.
And
really interesting. I think if you were to, I would like to scan your brain and scan my brain. I feel like they would look completely different. Like you've got just different connections in there from your music.
And I think it's like similar to to someone who plays bass, and you both play bass. You kind of listen to something through a lens of what's the bass line doing, how do these harmonies kind of function and live on top of what I'm playing.
Yeah.
And as a pianist I deal with that too, but usually in a simpler format, because I have other stuff to worry about. But
yeah, that's something that sort of opened up my ears too when I started playing drums. And not that I didn't listen to the drums before, but just to get more of a sense of exactly how they're doing what they're doing, and then to hear something and be like, holy shit, I have no idea how he's doing that. That was a nice experience. And as I learned other instruments, that sort of
and it's funny,
made me listen more intently.
What actually kind of made me realize this is when I started doing piano bar gigs, because while I was up at the theater in Connecticut, I kind of supplemented my weekly whatever with two bar gigs, one on a Tuesday night, one on a Sunday night, and I would get requests, and most of the classic rock canon is not piano based unless you're doing a Billy Joel or Elton John tune or a couple other ones. So it's like, how do I distill that information to the piano? How do I,
capture it the best?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was very rarely a process where I sat and figured out a tune. It was just kind of like listening to it a whole bunch and then just kind of dicking around. And it's like, oh, well, that kind of works. And and you just kind of train yourself to process it and then, shoot it out. Because I started playing piano so early, I feel like there's a very strong connection between how my brain works and how it spits out into my fingers.
Is that part of how you arrange? I mean, you arrange at the piano and pick things out, and
yeah. And so anytime that I can translate what I'm arranging either through the lens of a piano or as my impulse as a singer, because I do, I've done a lot of choral singing and, not too much solo singing, but, I'm very sensitive in terms of bad voice leading, so I try and, when I'm doing these, either whether it was the brass quintet thing that I did or some of these other vocal ensemble things, I try and go through each line after I find out the voicings that I like. And it's like, are all of these, workable? And if not, I'll try and find another way around it.
Cool.
I feel like inevitably my hands just like especially not just at the piano, but no matter what instrument I'm at, like you could boil down all of my playing to like, oh, that's a drummer playing an instrument.
Oh, really?
It's like, oh, that's a drummer playing piano. That's a drummer playing the bass. Like, and I think I feel more at home even on the bass than I do on most percussion instruments. But I play the bass like a drummer. Like it's far more like the James Jamerson. Like it's the pocket and the groove first, and then after that, then it's like, oh, so what's the harmony now? What am I going to be doing during this time? It's like when I play the piano, the last thought I think about is like, what melody could I put over this?
Well, even as a composer, Dave, like some of the stuff that I've really loved the most that you've done is your like musique concrète stuff. And the thing that I like about it is how you've made all the different pieces so rhythmic in how you've put them together. So, you have all these independent elements and then you put them together as a drummer, to create, what's this, what's the groove that I'm establishing? What's the, it's neat how we kind of go back into our corners, whether that's the flute or the piano or the drums.
Yep.
Can we talk a little bit about the work that you didn't mention, your projects that you didn't mention earlier, like Pardo's Turn and your Limerick project, which I'm a huge fan of?
Oh, sure. So Pardo's Turn is an ongoing web series through YouTube that I've established since June 6th. June 6th was my first episode with the great Tony Award winner Chuck Cooper. And it started out a couple weeks prior. I was kind of at a job interview for this place called the Growing Studio, where I music direct kind of classes and accompany other kind of master classes or sessions. And they asked me where I wanted to be in 5 years, as most places do. And like, oh, I want to be conducting a Broadway show or whatever. And they said, what are you doing to get there? And I didn't have a good answer. I'm like, well, I'm music directing regionally and I got a good review and hopefully people will like it was just a really shitty answer. So I took a step back and I thought to myself, what can I do to get back, on Broadway or get working with the people who I need to be working with in order to, be approached for these projects. So I said, obviously one thing that you can do is kind of shadow the people in the pit, and there are people who are really great at that kind of networking. I'm okay. I'm not the best. I'm not the worst. But one thing I have done, especially working at the at the Opera House for more than 3 full seasons, is having a roster of really fantastic Broadway singers, who and performers, who I've become friendly with, and it's the idea of aiming up. You as composers want to get some really established performers to play your music. Right. You were just talking about, it's like, oh well, if Randy gets this Grammy Award, then I have a Grammy Award winner singing my piece. And so similarly, I thought, if I can get these really fantastic Broadway personalities, who are generous enough with their time and talent to go on my show, they bring me closer to where they are. And it was just a way of kind of going back in the direction of professional New York theater rather than kind of going elsewhere and disseminating what I've learned, down to people who know less than what I do. So last summer I was... in addition to conducting company, I was also the music director for an initiative called the Musical Theater Conservatory at Barrington, mostly with college-age students who understudied the various roles in the main stage shows. And then during the day, we had some classes. And one of the classes that I kind of established was just kind of taking... it was kind of performance-based. They would go and sing a song from their book, and then we would work on it. And one of the things that I kind of emphasized was what musical clues is the composer giving you? What's this song saying, not in terms of its lyric, but in its music? What does the melody say about what this character wants? What does this harmonization imply? When the rhythm kind of has a chord that cuts off suddenly, why is there's a reason for most of these things, especially in some of the older musical theater songs that aren't as pop based, because a lot there's some really smart pop writing now, but
It's a more rigid framework.
Exactly. So anyway, it was just these types of conversations that I got a sense that weren't being discussed in their conservatory programs that they were studying in. So I said, well, not many people are talking about this element of song study and song analysis. So let's get these great people to come on and sing a song of their choosing, so they would have a baseline to talk about it with some authority and a personal frame of reference. I would front load the episode with my own kind of perspective from a music director's standpoint. And then we would just chat and have a good time and perform it really kind of nice and casually. And it's really taken off. I've been so lucky with the caliber of people who came on and the quality of the conversations that we've had and the kind responses that I've gotten. So
it's been great. I really enjoy it. It's so much fun. I don't... musicals aren't something I seek out on a daily basis, but really enjoyed every episode of your show, and especially the analysis. I don't know. Obviously, you don't know what the composer was thinking. I don't know what the composer was thinking, but pretty much everything you say, I buy it. It makes a lot of sense.
I was playing a masterclass over the summer when I was at Weston, and the composer Andrew Lippa, who did The Wild Party, and he wrote some songs for Your Good Man Charlie Brown, and Big Fish is his musical, really well-established guy. His partner was one of the reed players in the pit for West Side Story, which was playing at our main stage. I was at the second stage, and so he just kind of was there for the summer as a writing retreat while his partner was in the pit. And so, we recruited him to do a masterclass with with some kids. And we were talking about this very thing. And he said, it's not your job as an interpreter to know what the composer was thinking. Your job is to create something that makes sense for you. And, and that's it. So whether or not I'm right, if I can back it up, or if I can, sell it in a way that makes sense and that's convincing,
can you strike a vein of some those universal truths that it
just gives you a perspective. And I think as actors, the more specific you can be, the more convincing you can be. So it's been a lot of fun, and I've been able to kind of lead into some fun tangential conversations. Next week, I'm meeting with my friend Eric Ulloa, who, in addition to being a performer, is also a playwright. He's done the book for a couple musicals in development, and also a play called 26 Pebbles about the Sandy Hook Massacre. So he's really well connected to that. To those people and that community and that legislation. He's actually done a lot of activism, about gun violence, and so we're going to be doing the gun song from Assassins, and kind of use that as a launch pad to talk about American gun culture and how it relates to musical theater and shows like Annie Get Your Gun and Assassins and West Side Story, and it's so it should be a fun discussion.
Awesome. Yeah, really cool. How long are your sessions normally for Pardo's turn? I know you boil it down to about 15 minutes.
They're about 15 minutes, but we talk usually about a half hour. I rent the rooms for an hour. I usually use them for about 45. If I have the analysis ready to go, sometimes I'll record it that day. Otherwise, I'll just do it, at home or wherever. And where we are now, in my friend Barb's apartment,
shout out to Barb.
By the way, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Barb.
Yes.
Fantastic space.
She's been so generous, and so we've done a whole bunch of sessions here at her lovely home. So
why do you record anywhere else?
I know, right? It's
great. Lovely view, lovely piano. 5 stars. We gave ourselves a little more to go on for this next improvisation. We decided to pick a word and a key for inspiration. We settled on Clusterfuck in D minor. Dave returns to djembe and percussion, Dan sits back at the piano, and I stayed on flute. It took on an ABA form, featuring 2 wildly explosive 6/8 passages that bookend a more relaxed middle section.
there's one thing that I wanted to make sure we asked, and I know this is a little boilerplate, but I feel like this is something I don't know about you necessarily, and I'm curious. What is your your dream show or dream shows that you would love more than anything to direct one day? I know you like to create ones from scratch as well and help bring them up. Whichever of Eli's ends up being his greatest masterwork, that's going to be the
It's shout out to my friend Eli Bolin, who I've been kind of a partner with as a transcriptionist and arranger. I've done 2 of his kind of more children family shows that are produced through Theatre Works USA, based on the children's book series Skippy John Jones. So those were both a lot of fun. We did a show called Found off-Broadway at the Atlantic Theater, and then in Philly at the Philadelphia Theater Company, which was just so great, based on found texts.
That's cool.
There's a whole magazine called Found Magazine where people find.
I used to get it.
Oh, really? Yeah. So it's a whole musical about Davy Rothbart and the creation of that, and a lot of the songs use the found materials as the text inspiration, either verbatim or inspired by. And then we just did another kind of original musical in Toronto called Wally Flynn. That's kind of really heartfelt family story. Obviously, it would be a dream to music direct one of his shows, just because he's become such a brother to me. But one of the classics. I know the show is often viewed as problematic, but Carousel is probably one of my favorite scores. I just hear that first 4 bars of the waltz, and I'm just sold. I'm just ready to go for the entire 2+ hour ride. I don't know, some of my other favorite shows. You're in Town, I love. I think it's just so brilliant and fun.
One, yeah.
And it's one of the earliest ones I had the chance to music direct as an amateur, so it holds a special place for me. The Most Happy Fella, I just think is one of the most beautiful stories, because it's one of the rare shows that has to do with the theme of forgiveness, which to me is so powerful. I don't know. I think anytime you work on a show, you really come to love it, and you really find things that make it special. And I
that's
think
great.
That means you're doing it right.
I think that's a test of a really great show. Anything that has diminishing returns, the more you play it, the more you see it. And maybe that's just me as a personality. I just kind of try and latch on and find the positive, because I know I'm in for the ride regardless, and I'd rather enjoy it. But I think if you can play a score every day and find a new thing to love about it, that's the real mark of a great piece of work.
Well, what did Nelly say yesterday? Joy is one of the best forms of resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Limericks are another one. So let's talk about
Yes.
that. I love your limericks.
Yes.
Quite the transition.
What are you going to do when you're done with, when either he is, out, or...
All right, so we're referring to
do
some
a book or what?
I would love. People have been asking, if I'm going to put these in the book. I'd love to put them in the book. Since February, I think it's February 12th, 2017. It was my first one. It started out actually a friend of mine. His name is Kirk Lawrence. Kirk Lawrence, a friend of mine from local community theater back in Reading, wrote a limerick about Trump. And then I'm like, oh, that's fun. So I kind of wrote a reply, and then for about a month we were kind of keeping each other honest and writing one a day. And he kind of bowed out, and I kind of took it on. And it hasn't quite been every day. On times where I'm a little lax, I've tried to respond by having a 2 or 3 verse one a couple days later. But it's been a way to keep me politically engaged and informed, and just let out some of the frustration and the emotions. I never thought that I'd have to write about Nazis or about serious repeated gun violence without any changes in policy or posture. I've never thought I had to, write about a president of the United States accused of serious, sexual transgressions or treason with other foreign adversaries. I mean, the good thing about it is it's there's never a shortage of material to write about, and some of the ones are kind of shorter. And I wish I guess I could bring it up. So I started the Medium page. It's called Limericks of Resistance on Medium a while back, and I also post them to Twitter and Facebook. The good thing about Twitter going from 140 characters to 280 characters, selfishly, is that now I can put a full limerick without, because before I had to like screenshot it and link it because, it's in the middle of the last line, I always ran out of characters. I don't know if you care to hear one or two on the air.
Yeah, sure.
Hell yeah.
I just think that must have been so frustrating, especially the image file.
Okay, so this is one. It's a shorter, more comic one, having to do with the weekend's Mueller investigation, which kind of came to a bit of a head. Mueller's keeping things close to the vest, which has led to each plea and arrest. Much like Maury's reply, he starts, "That was a lie. What comes next? Trump's paternity test?" So not much biting there. This one is probably how I'll move. A lot of what has inspired the limericks is the polarization of our country, and how the further one goes to the right, the farther we have to kind of counteract it. And I think rightfully so. We can't just have a country that keeps moving closer and closer to policy that doesn't agree with us. Yeah. But in the process, we've kind of either lionized people or wanted their heads on the pike. And, for the most part, especially of our elder statesmen who are going, fall somewhere in the middle. And this is in response to Bush 41 and his death this week. So I said, "In these times of great polarization, Poppy Bush brought some grace to the nation. Was a mixed bag of sorts with some nasty cohorts, but his service deserves a citation. Can't excuse how he mishandled AIDS. Iran-Contra, our memory fades. But his gentle demeanor made statesmanship cleaner, and kindness, he had it in spades. So reject the broad brush when we paint. Most are neither a devil nor saint. If we focus on facts, not the stuff that attracts clickbait stories, there'll be no complaint."
That's great.
Nice.
Yeah. That's
anyway,
awesome.
so that's the Limericks of Resistance.
Well, if
Keeps me
this
sane.
helps at all, I definitely think I would strongly encourage you to put them out once they're all done.
Yeah, and
in some sort of.
And I guess I'm
physical
just kind of
package.
waiting because what I can't stand is I'm a big Simpsons fan, and I had the whole book that was the definitive Simpsons book, and then it keeps on coming out with seasons. It's so now it's Simpsons and Simpsons Forever, then Simpsons Beyond Forever, then Simpsons One Step Beyond Forever. It's just wait and then make a book. Anyway, so I'm going to wait and then make a book.
Great. I'm glad.
I cannot wait to read the final limerick when it's about celebratory good riddance to
man.
that fire.
It'll either be that or about I can finally stop writing these limericks.
And it's funny, you can only come up with so many rhymes, especially the ones that have the three parts. So I'm starting to go into these cycles I swear I've written this limerick before. And it just
It's kind of I swear I've heard this news article already.
yeah.
Yeah.
How many times does it repeat?
We're going to end today's episode with what's actually the first piece we improvised together. This one features myself on flute, Dan on piano, and Dave on djembe. It begins with a delicate, contemplative scene that gradually develops into a bit of a funky groove. You're one of our bigger fans, I think. You've
Yes.
listened to a bunch of our episodes, right?
Yeah, I've listened. I think I'm all caught up with all of them.
Sweet. Do you have any ideas of how we can make our show better?
Oh, I mean, obviously the quality of guests, has been great and continues to move forward. This was, I think I can speak for everybody that Robert and Nelly were just two awesome
superstars.
grabs.
It was incredible. Yeah.
Maybe I like how it's so diverse. You had your one friend who kind of was from your like punk rock days, and then some of your more classical collaborators, and then the woman a couple of weeks ago, or a month or two ago, who went to the improv convention, and so a lot of her stuff was a lot different. Kind of finding ways to keep the format the same and keep the content kind of fresh. I don't know. But I mean, it's always a fun listen. Whenever I have a long drive going back and forth from Connecticut or something, like, oh, it'd be a great time to catch up with Sean and Dave.
Nice.
Are there any segments that you would love to hear us do on future episodes?
And maybe that's it. Like, I'm not a huge podcaster, but I think having maybe like, it doesn't even have to be as formal as naming a section, but like, having something that you could look forward to, or something that you could slot in, even if it's not necessarily every episode. Kind of like how when I used to watch Jay Leno, it's like, oh, it's headlines. That's always, to have something that very quickly you can kind of get the picture of what the format's going to be, or like when I used to watch Whose Line, and it's like, oh, they're doing the hoedown, a sketch that you like, or a format of improvisation that's novel and fun. Like, even if it's something with you were talking about how you had a fortune teller, it's like, oh, this is a fortune teller one, so you can set up the parameters in a fun, novel way. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You could be maybe like to make a pressure cooker element, or like the nobody can see what I'm doing right now, but could add a fun element of like working against the clock. Is if we could set something up where like we just get a ping noise happening every 20 or 30 seconds, and we just quick knock out like be like 5 in a row, like quickly, like as varied as you can. Totally different miniature. It pings at a totally different miniature.
Yeah.
Some game or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
no, but just keep it coming.
Great. Yeah, we
You
will.
haven't found.
This part, we can put it in the episode or not, but I just wanted to say thank you for the record. Dan sent our first official piece of fan mail.
Oh, yes.
He sent me, this was a while back now, you sent me a box of pencils, the Magic Writers, and now I can't live without them, because you heard that I loved the Ticonderogas. You have converted me.
Okay, good. Yeah. So this actually goes back to my days at Goodspeed. My mentor, Michael O'Flaherty, who talked about people who kind of didn't go through a master's program. He dropped out of Eastman undergrad and basically learned what it was like, in New York, just pounding the pavement.
Awesome.
So my mentor, Michael, writes everything by hand. He's a composer too. He actually wrote the score to this Christmas Carol that I'm conducting now. And the only pencil that he will write are these Pacific Music Writers Corporation, which he special orders by the box. They're like a black, it's like a black kind of soft lead, but writes really smooth, especially on staff paper. And it has kind of an affixed pencil top eraser that's really good, and it's just a dream.
Great.
And when I heard that Dave, prefers to write longhand, I'm like, this is what I need to get him.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
tell me what you want, Sean, and
Well, I used to collect fine pens, expensive pens.
Okay, well,
Then I started collecting instruments instead, and that fell off.
Mm-hmm.
But the pens I usually, if I need to buy a new pen, it's usually like one of those, like the bottle one that comes from a recycled bottle. They write really smooth.
oh, I
So
don't know.
Pilot
he'd like you to send him a bass flute. is
Okay,
what he said.
Oh yeah, I'll take a bass flute, please. Contra, if you can swing it.
I heard Robert has one that
Oh yeah, we didn't get to use the Contra. That
No,
he
yeah,
owns one though.
He does.
Yeah.
but
God.
he brought his bass and
I don't
his
understand
piccolo and his flute.
like regular flutes are like 40,000. Like, I don't know. It's just so much material. Like, do they?
Yeah, like a contrabass, like a cheap contrabass flute goes for maybe 10 to 15,000, something like that. I didn't even want to ask what his what his cost.
Like
but,
a solid
I'm sure
goals,
he plays on the best. But I actually had my first contrabass flute experience a couple months ago. I played with the Westchester Flute Ensemble, Flute Alumni, Flute Ensemble Alumni Flute Ensemble concert.
There you go.
And
Did Dr. Rayleigh run that, or?
Yeah, but it was just like we get together and we had one rehearsal right before the concert and played the concert.
Cool.
And so they were like, we need people for low flutes. Like, does anyone want to play contra? And I was like, I've never touched one, but I'm game to try.
Cool. Was the embouchure a lot different, or?
Yes, it was. It was really hard to play, especially in the low register. I mean, you've got so much tubing to get those notes through. I really wish I could get some more power there, but
Yeah.
Like all the parts, since it is the thing trying to like provide the bass for the ensemble, everything was like low C's and low B flats, low C's and low D's, and it was just really difficult to get them out. But it worked okay. Some of them came out. It was fun. So anyway, I think that wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
sure.
And we will continue to follow each other's work, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, guys.
And thank you for listening to Sean and Dave Make Music. If you like what you heard today, please head over to danpardo.com to find out more about Dan and his numerous projects and to hear more of his playing. Make sure you also check out and subscribe to his YouTube show, Pardo's Turn, which I'll have links to in the show notes. And as always, if you like our show, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and colleagues if you think they might be into what we do. If you have any questions or comments or would like to submit a prompt for us to improvise off of, please send us an email at seananddaveMakeMusic@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SeanandDaveMakeMusic. For both of those, you've got to spell out the A-N-D. It's not an ampersand like in our logo. One more quick note of thanks, as I said up top, this was the final episode from our New York City recording session in December, and we've got to give another huge thank you to Barb for letting us use her gorgeous space to make this happen. I said it before, but I think it bears repeating. Beautiful piano, beautiful view. It was a 5-star experience, and I hope we can come back sometime. And one final teaser for those of you who are still listening past the plugs. We will eventually, hopefully sometime this year, be doing a crossover episode with my other podcast, Not Movies. We talked a little bit about my idea with Nellie Mackay a couple episodes ago, but basically we're going to try a format similar to the Great British Bake Off, but with music making. You can hear a little bit more about it on Not Movies episode 91, The Great Music Make-Off. Also, I'm just realizing that I probably haven't ever really plugged Not Movies here, so I'll go ahead and do that more generally. Not Movies is a podcast that I've been doing with my wife Summer and my friend Eric since late 2015. Each episode, we come up with an idea and a basic structure for a movie or TV show that doesn't exist yet. Dave was our guest on episodes 69 and 70, so those might be good ones to check out if you're interested, or just jump in on whatever episode catches your eye. Just fair warning, though, that show is a lot more silly and ridiculous than this one, so be prepared for that. I think you might not learn anything, but it's a lot of fun. Thanks again for listening this month. We'll see you next time. Bye.